So again, guys, we're talking about the symptoms of learned helplessness. How do I know I'm stuck in this pattern, this self-destructive pattern of learned helplessness? What are the symptoms? How do I know? You are in a negative situation of some kind. Maybe you know somebody who's in a negative situation of some kind. Like being lonely. You have this gap in your life, somebody who's not there to give your love to, somebody you don't go to bed with at night, someone who's, you can't wrap your arms around, somebody who's not there for you in the morning, no one to talk to, nobody to give your love to or take love from when you need it. And you feel stuck. You've come to accept being stuck, being in this pattern of emptiness and sadness as your fate. I bet, guys, you feel this a lot at night when you're lying in bed about to fall asleep and it's quiet in your house or your apartment. There's nothing going on and you just you just wish you had her there, don't you? And I think the feeling of helplessness and hopelessness is probably really compelling right there and then, especially if you've been alone for a long time. Others around you seem to validate your current negative situation. People tell you they feel sorry for you. People ask you, why don't you try online dating? Why don't you try something? You're lonely, you're sad. Maybe people tell you it's tough. Our culture is tough. It's not like it used to be. Maybe your mom tells you it was so much simpler when I was younger, when I met your dad. And people around you kind of validate that you are in this negative, stuck situation, and they're not encouraging. Nobody's challenging your perspective. Nobody's saying, dude, what's wrong with you? Except me, right? Nobody's out there saying, dude, stop, think about this. Challenge your thought process for a little bit. Are you sure you're as helpless in your current circumstances as you think you are? Others around you are in similar circumstances, and they seem helpless too. It's great when you go on the internet and you can read the sad sob stories of an awful lot of guys who tried international dating and got scammed. You know what? A lot of those guys didn't get scammed. They thought they got scammed, but they didn't get scammed. A lot of guys completely misunderstand cultural expectations and cultural behavior and think they're getting scammed when they're not getting scammed at all. She would only use her interpreter. She wouldn't use my interpreter. I got scammed. Maybe you did. Probably you didn't. There were reasons why she wanted her interpreter, similar to why a seller might want their real estate broker. And you can't use your real estate broker. I mean, honestly, sometimes that's the dynamic that's going on. You see others around you who are sad and lonely in our culture. You see other guys going, yeah, I have no idea what I'm going to do. Dating sucks in my community. There's no way to find somebody. It's really tough right now. And there's all of this, everybody around you in the same boat. Everybody's lonely. You don't see somebody out there who is happy and successful, who got there from a point you are currently in. So that just adds to your feeling of helplessness because you don't see evidence, discernible, visible evidence to the contrary, right? You've settled for counterfeit gratification in the form of correspondence. You've decided this is it. I mean, this is the best I got right here. I got this thing, this electronic thing, and that's my love relationship. That's as good as it's going to get, and I'm going to let it fulfill me because this is the only way I can find love and happiness in my life. To write letters, to have correspondence, to carry that forward indefinitely with no particular end game in mind. Tens of thousands of guys do that. Tens of thousands of guys do that every year. So let's talk about getting out of this self-destructive place. Let's talk about the prescription for unlearning learned helplessness. I touched on this at the end of my presentation last week. Let's carry it forward. I want you to understand the idea of what is a paradigm and how to break it. If you are in the middle of learned helplessness, if you are stuck right now, you probably are stuck because of a paradigm that you've completely bought into and you don't realize it. Again, paradigm is that word which describes how we look at something based on years of influence. So what is that influence? It could be impressions that we have of other countries that we got from the internet or from the news. Ukraine is dangerous, Colombia, drug lords, FARC, rebels, this and that, all the stuff that we see, which we think is an accurate representation of another place, when in fact it's a completely inaccurate representation. It's a very partial representation of what you actually experience. You know, maybe there's the paradigm of everybody's poor and desperate to get into America. Everybody wants to come to America. So this whole entire process is not about finding real love. This is about getting a green card, right? How many times have you heard that? Nothing, by the way, could be farther from the truth. It's really interesting that most people assume that's what's going on. That is not what's going on, I promise you. And if you really, really look at why women are here and how they got here and what their expectations are, that will clearly show itself to be true. That the women couldn't care less about getting a green card. They want a husband. They want a life mate. Getting a green card will be necessary for them to run their lives the way they currently run their lives wherever they are. But what they really want is what they have right now plus a husband, and that is the stickler for so many women. So you have to understand this is a paradigm. This is my paradigm. This is the way that I look at something, and it may not be logical. It may not be based in fact. It may not be correct. And there are ways to overcome that. For example, if you're interested in traveling to Costa Rica to meet women, to create a love relationship and romance, but you never talk to anybody who's done it, your impression of Costa Rica is very limited. If you go on the internet and look at guys who have failed to meet women in this process, your perspective is very limited. Many men fail because they did something to create their failure, and it's really hard for guys to know that. I can only imagine how many men are sitting back there seething mad at me right now because I'm basically accusing them of not owning what they own and correcting their expectations so that they could very easily and very effectively meet somebody. But you know what? It's absolutely true. I promise you. There are scams. There are men who get taken advantage of. There are women who get taken advantage of. There are good people, lots and lots of them. There are disingenuous people. Right? You don't need me to generalize. But the point is, if you just go out and look at the negatives, the people who have failed, the people who are unhappy, the people who are angry and grouchy and Eeyore, that's your paradigm. That's what your paradigm is going to become. It amazes me how often we have guys looking at whether or not to travel to a country to find love, and they never talk to anybody who's done it. Why wouldn't you do that? That's like taking a flight lesson from an instructor who's crashed his planes a bunch of times. Why would you do that? There are reasons why people succeed when they succeed, and you need that to fuel your interest and your desire to get on the plane and go and meet somebody. So understand, first of all, that learned helplessness is a trap, and if you stay there, you're going to be unhappy and it won't change. But that it is a trap. You can get out of it. You are in control of that if you open up your thought processes a little bit. If you begin to look around and learn. Understand the idea of what is a paradigm and how to break it. The way you break it is to get information. Reliable, hardcore, factual information. Challenge your logic. Challenge your thinking. Use visualization. We're going to talk about that in a moment. Visualization is such an important tool. All right, I told you guys that at one point I was in a really rough place in my life. We all come to these rough places. And I saw a simple tattoo in a photograph on someone's wrist, and the tattoo said, "Live a simple and blessed life." And I remember the day I read that. It was a Sunday morning, and it hit me like lightning. And I thought, simple and blessed life. What a great idea. Not complicated, not cursed, not stupid, not unhappy, simple and blessed. And I thought, that's me, totally. I mean, my expectations for happiness in life, man, a small house, a flower garden, a couple of kayaks, some camping equipment, a big dinner table so that my children and their friends, family would come and have dinner with me on Sunday afternoon, a burning fire in a fireplace. That's pretty much it. I'm the happiest guy in the world if I can just put all that together. None of that is so hard to get, right? None of that is difficult. It's very simple and extremely blessed. I wrote it down, which is so important. That's part of the visualization process. Write it down, look at it every day, and ask yourself, what's so freaking hard about this? Can I do this? And if you can do it, begin to move forward toward it, every single part of it. Talk to others who have shed their paradigm. Talk to others who were stuck like you, who did something to get unstuck and got good results. Call me up and just talk to me or write to me, Bud, I want to go to China, I want to go here, I want to go there, I want to meet somebody who's done this successfully. Can I talk to people and they can share their story and their experience? The answer is always, yeah. You just got to ask, and you should be doing that. That is your prescription, guys. Visualize, write it down. I want a beautiful girl in my life by this time next year. In January, we were talking a lot about this year being the year, right, guys? We were talking about this being the year when you found love, love came back into your life. Somebody told me today, I talked to a very good friend of mine named Rick, who I've been on tour with, who I absolutely love and adore, and he's from Florida. I love this man. And he said something that I had forgotten for a while, but I've said it many, many times, and I completely forgot it, and it's true. And he said, we're so much better as men when we're in love. When love is in our lives, when we're being loved. You know, that's what we were truly meant for. And I realize there are men that can go and be alone for long periods of time. You know, somebody close to me, man, he can get in his kayak and just go off in the distance for weeks at a time and be perfectly happy. You know, it's interesting. I admire people like that because I'm not that. I'm not. I can't be that. I really do need family and a few friends around me, and I need the love of one woman around me. I need that. The right person in my life at the right time, and the right people, family and close. I need that, and I'm so much better as a man when I have that, and many, many, many men that I meet feel the exact same way. So visualize it, write it down. I'm going to bring love into my life in the next year. She is going to be from Colombia. She's going to be from the Philippines. I am going to go to the Philippines. I'm not going to spend thousands of dollars writing letters. I'm going to spend a few $1,000s going to find her, and I'm going to bring her back. And she's going to be in my life every single day, holding my hand, cuddling me at night, talking endlessly, becoming best friends. Everywhere we'll go together. I'm going to do it. We're going to go to the coffee house. We're going to make dinner on Sunday evening. We're going to, you know, bake a cake on the weekend and have coffee and eat out on the deck, you know, watching the leaves fall. We're going to go and buy a Christmas tree and cut it down and drag it back into the house and set it up and decorate it and play Christmas music. We're going to go camping in the summertime on the lake shore. We're going to do these things together. Write it down. That simple and blessed life that you want to share with somebody, it's so important. And once you've written it down, guys, we're talking about breaking that paradigm. Get factual information, but here's how you challenge your thought process, and here's how you begin to crumble that negative paradigm that's got you wrapped up in chains. Here's how you do it. You start with pillars of truth. You start with a few simple facts. We've talked about them, and I mentioned them last week. And the biggest one is people fall in love everywhere on the freaking planet. They do. You cannot deny, nobody can deny that people fall in love everywhere. How do they fall in love? They become face to face, they meet each other, they're introduced to each other, they bump into each other. They like the way each other looks. They compliment each other. They relax for a moment and talk to each other. They find some common ground. They get more and more comfortable literally by the minute together, and after an hour, they're really interested in each other. So they arrange coffee or dinner or a date, and they go out on a date, and the rest is history. And that's how people fall in love. It happens everywhere on the planet. That is your pillar of truth. If you can find anywhere the rule, find it in the Bible, find it in the Quran, find it anywhere that says, if you're from here, you cannot fall in love with somebody from here. Because you can. There's no rule anywhere. I mean, there's no God-given rule. If God didn't make the rule, then what rule is there? There's no rule. Those are your pillars of truth, guys. Everybody falls in love everywhere, sooner or later. Anybody can fall in love anywhere sooner or later if they just get in front of each other. And no matter what happens to you in this process, no matter what you encounter or whatever crap you read, whatever negative stuff you read, always come back to, yeah, but wait a minute. People fall in love everywhere. And people can fall in love from anywhere. It's true. It's absolutely true. Always, always stand on your pillars of truth. Visualize what you want to bring into your life, stand on your pillars of truth, and don't ever be dissuaded, and go get your girl. And don't settle for being trapped. Don't settle for being in this pattern of learned helplessness. Don't believe for 1 second that you can't change your circumstances, because you can. All right, so there's a couple of financial advisors who are very famous. One of them in particular, who I won't mention, many of you will know who I'm talking about. But one of his great pieces of advice, and it is a solid, great piece of advice, is if you're in debt and you want to make a significant change, save $1,000. Just go and start with that. Save $1,000, because so many Americans don't have $1,000 anywhere. Save $1,000. Why? Once you've saved $1,000, you know it can be done. You've created forward motion. You had to alter some circumstances in your life in order to do it. And once you've done that, you've proven to yourself you can break out of this pattern of learned in debt helplessness. And it makes great sense, right? And this is the kind of dynamic I'm talking about, guys. Take a few steps in the right direction. The law of attraction will then take over and guide you because you have created this forward motion, which immediately creates a reciprocal motion right back in your direction, and things will come to you. Opportunities will come to you. They will. Do not settle for being stuck in the pattern of learned helplessness. Do not settle for correspondence and virtual relationships. A lot of guys, silly, good men, convince themselves they're in love. I have guys tell me every week, I'm completely in love with a woman I've never talked to. That makes no freaking sense. None whatsoever. You are not in love. She is not in love. You are delusional if you believe you are in love with a woman you've been corresponding to that you've never talked to. Who does that? Don't do it. That is the pattern of learned helplessness. That's you settling for something less than you deserve. Don't do it. Get up and go get your girl for real. If you settle, your dream dies, guys. And if you settle, I promise you, you will wake up one day in the future and your counterfeit relationship just won't do it for you anymore. And you will probably have spent thousands of dollars by then. You deserve better than that. Right? Right. Somebody told me once that I say right too often, to which I said, okay. Revisit the role of the interpreter. Let's talk about that for a little bit, and then I'll get some more of your questions in, guys. You can ask your questions by clicking the green box above my shiny dome, and I'll be more than happy to answer them for you shortly. The whole point of the role of interpreter is this. Basically, what it comes down to is if you're going to get on a plane and go and meet somebody for, the purpose of finding love in marriage, unless you are an incredibly good Sherlock Holmes type of guy, you're going to work with an interpreter sooner or later. If you go to the Philippines and wander around and meet women at the mall and on the street, hi, how are you? Can we date each other? You could do that. The women speak English. If you're going to do that anywhere else, China, Ukraine, etc., it's an incredibly hard thing to do. It really is. There is an excellent chance when you make the decision to pursue somebody from another culture for love that you're going to work with an interpreter. Quite frankly, if you go on the internet and profiles come up, those profiles did not magically appear there. And most women do not join these sites by themselves. Most women meet a representative from one of these sites or one of these local agencies. They talk about international dating as an opportunity, just like you and I are doing. And then the women decide to join by way of that agency. And there are interpreters that are involved, interpreters that run the agency, own the agency, and conduct the processes of those agencies. The vast majority of women at sites like ours and our site come to us by way of, in one form or another, interpreters. They are an integral part of what we do, and you can't avoid them unless you're going to go learn proficiently the language of the girl from your intended country, which, let's face it, most of you aren't going to do. The point is, what I really want to emphasize tonight is that the women in this process have expectations of work with interpreters. We always talk about whether I want to use an interpreter or not, and who I want to use as an interpreter, and whether interpreters are necessary. But the women actually have expectations of working with interpreters. They do. And it's important for you to understand that, because you can't you can't get to know the women. You can't break the barriers. You can't create romance and courtship and relationship if you don't understand that. So let's just talk about some of the obvious things. Why do women value interpreters? Women value the interpreter because the interpreter is quite often the reason women have come to this process to begin with. They are the reason the women are at the socials, the reason women's profiles are on the sites. They met somebody who owned an agency, who worked as an interpreter, who convinced them you should give this a try. It's a great option for you, just like I am doing for you right now. Women expect their agencies and their interpreters to keep them safe. Really, bud? Safe? Really? Women expect interpreters to weed out the stalkerish guys. They're out there, trust me. Unfortunately, they are. Women expect interpreters to weed out the men that are, not age appropriate for them. Women expect interpreters to weed out the men that are just not appropriate for them. Now, a lot of women are pretty broad and inclusive in their criteria for somebody, but if there's screening to be done, the women generally expect the interpreters to help them with that, just like you expect agencies to help you with that. In Ukraine, there are cultural behaviors that are very, very significant. In other words, Women have a deep understanding of why they need an interpreter and who their interpreter is going to be. They will say to us, look, you're the one who decided to come to Ukraine and meet somebody. Do you speak Ukrainian? Do you speak Russian? Well, how are we going to communicate? You got to use an interpreter. Doesn't that make sense? Wouldn't you do that? Why wouldn't you do that? Otherwise, it's just a very cumbersome and difficult process. Women want you to be able to use an interpreter. They want to be able to meet you, to go out on a date. As we were talking earlier with questions around the interpreters, how great it is, Dave was talking about his interpreter and such, how great it is to have a really cute interpreter who likes you and is proud of you and is proud to introduce you to the women that come to us. And have that interpreter working on a date with you where she really likes this girl and she really likes you and she can clearly see what a great couple you're going to be and she wants to help the two of you. Can you imagine how cool that is? And you're working with this really dynamic sweetheart of an interpreter who likes you, likes the girl, and is really happy to be doing that work. Women want that dynamic. They don't want to sit in a date that's boring, a date that feels like a job interview, a date where they feel like your interpreter is against them and screening them out, where they have to prove something. Why would they do that? That's not fun. That's not a date. That's an interview. And women care about how they're seen in public. So they want, when you're dating, they don't want everybody in the room to be staring at you as you're trying to communicate on Google Translate on a first date, and it's awkward and weird, and that robotic voice, everybody can hear it. So they basically hear your electronic conversation. Women in Ukraine hate that. You know, women in Colombia just don't understand that. Women in China think it's odd, right? Use an interpreter, at least for a little bit. It's so convenient and easy, and women absolutely expect that you're going to do that. And remember, every aspect of what we do involves an interpreter, and you can't get around it. So you definitely want to have a positive impression of and a positive experience when using an interpreter, because they are the ones who translate your correspondence. Every single time you write to a woman through a site, her correspondence is translated by an interpreter, yours and hers. When gifts are delivered, interpreters are usually working on that for you. Obviously, when you're meeting and having introductions and dates, interpreters are involved in that. Your extended courtship, when you get to know somebody, you'll lean on your interpreter for a little bit of additional help and support and work as your relationship with someone develops. When you're in the fiancé visa process and you need a document, or you need help, or you need to talk to the parents about something, the interpreter will be involved in that. And at some point, your girl is going to want English lessons if she doesn't speak English. Maybe an interpreter will be involved with tutoring or helping with the delivery of those English lessons, right? And very little of what we do is possible without the work of interpreters on some level. So you have to maintain a really good positive idea of how to use interpreters. You want to turn your interpreter into an advocate. You want your interpreter to be your advocate. What does that mean? She likes you, she supports you, she wants to help you, and she can easily communicate your strengths and your good intentions when you're out on dates or when you're talking to your girl. You want to turn your interpreter into an advocate. So obviously, guys are going to come back and say, but you cannot deny that there are interpreter scams. There are. There are. Sometimes there are. And it's no fun to get scammed. And we don't want you to get scammed. Well, there are two possible risk areas where an interpreter could possibly, if she's disingenuous, take advantage of you. One of them is in correspondence, and one of them is around dates. You are not likely to get a girl's direct contact information through a site like ours or someone else's, while you're corresponding prior to where you've met. Why? Because a lot of work went into bringing those profiles in. Somebody pounded the pavement in Kharkov, Ukraine. Somebody beat the street in Shenzhen, China, and brought those profiles to us. And that cost a lot of money, and it took a lot of hard work, and that's not a $9 sale. It's just not. And a lot of guys aren't happy about that, but those same guys are not starting agencies where you're giving away contact information for $9, because you can't. It just isn't going to work. So correspondence is definitely where a lot of translators and agencies are getting paid. And that's the role. It's like the real estate broker selling the house. If you want to buy a house, you can do it without a real estate broker. It's probably much easier to use a real estate broker, but brokers got to get paid. That's how it works. That's life. You don't fight it. You go with it, but you choose the right broker or someone with a reliable reputation. And you know, obviously you set out with the goal of actually buying the house. So you go through a process that makes sense. You identify your house, you go and you freaking buy it. So the way you limit, the way anybody can take advantage of you in correspondence is you establish limits, which means I'm going to get on a plane and I'm going to go and meet somebody and I'm going to find love and create a love relationship for myself. I am not going to write letters for a year. I'm just not going to do it. I'm not going to spend more than X amount of dollars on correspondence no matter what. I will decide I'm going to meet somebody, and I will begin to write to somebody and tell them I'm coming to meet you because I'm coming to your city. Can we meet? And that is the clearest, shortest, most cost-effective path you can take. So you'll do that instead of writing with no end game in mind, letting it go month after month after month after month. That's where somebody can take advantage of you guys. You've got to have a plan and an end game in mind. And correspondence is just the beginning. And then obviously when you're out on dates, how can you keep an interpreter from taking advantage of the situation on dates? Follow a little bit of simple advice. Every time you go on one of our tours, every time you go to one of our cities, we'll recommend places for you to go on dates. Go to those places. And don't go to those places that aren't on that list, at least not in the beginning, until you and your interpreter have a good relationship. Just so you can be sure that nothing happened that you're uncomfortable with, just go to the places we recommend. There are a whole bunch of them. Any girl who doesn't want to go to any of the places that we recommend, you probably shouldn't be dating her anyway. Ask for help from your local staff where possible. If you think you have a misunderstanding with an interpreter, ask someone to intervene. Do it in a productive, positive way. Hey, you know what? I think that my interpreter and I aren't understanding each other over this issue. I want to make sure I understand what she's saying, and this is what I'm hearing. This is the message I think I'm getting. Does that seem typical? Does that seem right? Are her expectations typical? All right. So how should I react to this then? What would you do if you were me? How can I give her the right information? How can I carry this forward? Ask our staff for help. And let them help you, because they will. But again, guys, the biggest thing you can do for yourself, quite frankly, is just keep it real. Keep it real. I have guys that go on tour only to meet the top supermodel wannabes in Kiev. I mean, the top 1% Photoshop boobed, thong wearing supermodels in Kiev. And if they can't meet the supermodels in Kiev, the whole thing is a bloody scam. That's a joke. That's ridiculous. It really is. If you're worthy of meeting the top 1% of Victoria's Secret models in Kiev, good for you. You probably should own a yacht. If that's not you, that's great, because other women are there who are extremely lovely, very appropriate for you, and they will make you happy if you just divorce yourself from that fantasy-driven thing. It's tough love, guys. I'm sorry, but I'm giving it to you whether you want it or not, because I want you to succeed. If you're up for it, if you can meet the supermodels and thongs, good for you. I would recommend meeting a number of people, meeting people who are really appropriate for you in their appearance, in their criteria, in their habits, in their lives, in their circumstances, in their age, and keep it real. And you won't get scammed. A lot of guys get scammed because disingenuous, dishonest people scam them, which is wrong. But they get scammed because they're not even in the same zip code when it comes to real expectations, realistic expectations. And quite frankly, they make it easy. So don't do that to yourself, all right? Yeah, you better listen to me, you bunch of turkeys. You know what would be great? What would be great is if my job became like the Maytag repairman. Remember the Maytag repairman? Kirk's like, who the heck is the Maytag repairman? So way back when, do you remember the Maytag repairman? Dude sitting there with a reliable Maytag, machine that never needs to be repaired, so he's got nothing to do and he's completely bored. I would love to become the Maytag repairman. I know there's nobody listening to my webcast anymore, right? You all got on a plane, you went, you met somebody, fabulous, perfect person for you. You're giving your love, you're getting in return, you're happy as can be. And it's nothing but tumbleweeds, weeds, right? Nobody's out there. I would love that. I really would. Let's work toward that, okay, guys? Right? Let's get unstuck. Let's break the paradigm, break the mold. Let's go forward, create motion, get up. And go get your girl. Dude, do you have any idea? Do you have any freaking idea how many lonely women there are in this world who would love a reliable life partner to give their love to? There's no reason for you to be sad and lonely and alone in your life. There isn't. Get up, put on the man pants, call me up, and let's do something about it.